I never felt safe in my whole life, and I didn't know it. So it's one thing for those of you that are listening, it's one thing to like orient to mentally understanding safety. It's like, yeah, I feel safe. Of course I feel safe. But to actually experience relative safety in our system is a whole other dynamic. And that experience is where authenticity lives. That's where dynamic power lives. That's where sovereignty lives. That's where clarity of thought lives. That's where resourcefulness, resiliency lives. Because as soon as we and our nervous systems, don't feel safe, and especially if we don't know they don't feel safe, we're at the mercy of adaptation strategies, and we're going to ultimately be chasing goals and desires that actually aren't ours.
Women, this is a business podcast like no other. It is time to turn on your body, your life force, your eros, and your mission. It is time to tune up the volume of your voice and your message. Let this podcast be a permission slip and a portal into the next level of expansion in your business and the next upgrade in your personal brand and body of work. I will bring to you feminine leaders, way showers, and disruptors who are doing business differently. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Here we go. Hello, everybody. I am here today with the lovely Zoe. I cannot wait for you all to meet this woman. She is, and I am not underestimating, I am not dimming this down. You are the most powerful voice that I have come across in the realm of somatic healing and nervous system. And so Zoe is a somatic experiencing practitioner, a transformational facilitator, and founder of the Somatic Way, amongst many, many other things. She's also a mama, a visionary, a lover. Like you have, and all of your credentials. You've definitely have embodied and embody just such power and potency in your body of work, from your business to your motherhood in all aspects. And that is why I am so excited to have you here today to talk about somatics and to talk about the nervous system, and really why having a strong foundation when it comes to our body and our system is key to be able to hold these visions and these missions that are calling us forward. Zoe is also a teacher inside Body of Work Foundation, so she is really the go-to somatic expert to support visionary leaders in really truly embodying and holding not only their body of work, but being able to show up as present, engaged human beings that enjoy the journey. Because I know from my own experience, I am a creative, I am a visionary, and sometimes these visions can feel really big and can really pull me into states of overwhelm and shutdown and all of the things. And I was quite unconscious to this for a really long time. I was wondering, like, wow, this creative idea felt so good, but now all of a sudden, like, my mind is spinning and I can't, focus, and nothing is working. And so holding the vision, embodying the vision, and actually living in a way that felt peaceful and aligned and integrity was not in my system. And somatics and breath work and a lot of these foundational practices really support me, and I've not mastered it. I'm still human. I still get dysregulated. I still forget all of the things. But Zoe, let's start with presence. Let's start with presence, this state of stillness, and why most of us are unable to hold this. What's happening in our bodies and in our nervous system that is keeping us out of the present moment, and how do we cultivate a state to be able to hold presence?
I love how you asked like the biggest question for the whole the whole thing.
Here we go.
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much, love, for that. Yeah, really powerful introduction and just feeling so seen in that. So when it comes to, well, it's interesting you use the word stillness with presence, because this is a bit of a misnomer, because presence doesn't always require stillness. Presence really means that we're responding congruently with what is. And so often in the world of somatics, we start to recognize that there are very necessary, very natural and essential, say, emotions or experiences, or the need to fight or the need to flee in order to be present with what is. And so first of all, it's really uncoupling this need for stillness in order for presence to be available. Now, of course, there is, within like full presence, there is a need at some level to have access to regulation in our nervous system. And at the bottom of regulation is an expression of our soma, our nervous systems, which are basically our 24/7 threat detectors that are constantly on the lookout for threat, emotional and physical threat. Are we actually safe? Now, the challenge is so many people don't experience presence and regulation because our trauma, not what happened to us, but what's living inside of our bodies because of what did or didn't happen in this lifetime and lifetimes beyond, right? And in our lineage, trauma has no timeline. And so what's present in our body isn't always present with and congruent with what's happening in our present environment. And so a lot of us are living with this dichotomy of having an environmental experience that says one thing, but then an inner experience that says another, right? And so a very big example, a clear example would mean like, you know, we often hear about public speaking, or like expressing and sharing our voice can be really nerve-wracking. Now, does our level of fear and anxiety actually match and meet the moment of the threat of people witnessing? And it usually doesn't, right? Now, what is this at bay? There's an incongruent response. And so this is where it's one thing to be present with what is, and it's also one thing to be present and real with what's present and happening inside. And so, for instance, I right now am attuning to the presence of your question. Yet if I attune to the presence of what I'm experiencing, I have like, you know, a little bit of like excitement mixed with a bit of nervousness and trembling, and I'm still a little bit invested in the energy of my client that I just worked with. So there's presence, and the context of presence is really important. So I could talk on and on, but yeah.
I love that answer. I love that
Yeah.
answer, because it's, I think that is a misconception that we're all meant to be in this like Zen still state, but what we are meant to be doing is responding to what is. And so I'd love to hear from just that example. And if I'm going to really presence to what's alive in my body right now, you know, like I definitely feel there's some tingles in the womb. There's some sensation there. You know, there's a bit of contraction in this area. And so what do we do with this information? You know, you're noticing, picking up what's happening, you're sensing in your body.
Yeah.
And so what is the value, first of all, of having that somatic awareness? And then what do we do with this information once we become present to it?
So I think of it like we have 3 opportunities in every moment. One is to sustain what's happening. One is to cope with what's happening. So sustaining could mean that it could get worse, right? If we're leaning into, say, like a more negative experience. Coping would mean it's not getting worse, but we're just coping. Or the other one is we actually have the opportunity to heal. So when we learn about somatics and we get more versed with somatic integrity, and we develop a relationship with our own soma and our own nervous systems, we have choice points about recognizing, okay, do I have capacity to cope, or can I actually lean into this as a healing moment? And so, for instance, your question, like, what do we do with this, is really relative to the conditions of what's happening in our environment. Like, okay, I'm a mama, the dishes are full, the kids need to go to sleep, my son's got a fever, I've got a podcast to go to. And so the conditions there are calling forth my presence, and my reality is calling forth coping, right? And so how would I cope in this moment? For me, I'm really focusing on the gravity, the weight of my bones, the density of my soma, the structure. I'm leaning into my attachment relationship with you, so I'm orienting to joining and feeling the co-regulation of another human who feels physically and emotionally safe. My periphery is noticing and orienting that I'm in a safe environment. I'm paying attention to my cues. I'm thirsty. Just before this, I was like, I have to go pee. And so this is coping. It's like truly learning to listen and not override what is. And healing is building our capacity to be with what's unfamiliar. And what's unfamiliar is often what's uncomfortable. Now, oftentimes our mind will lean into a coupling dynamic and say, well, what's uncomfortable is usually negative. But what I found, and I just had a client earlier, is we recognize that often it is our power, it is our individuation, it is our brilliance, our self-expression that often creates the most discomfort because of our cultural conditioning, because of our suppression and plentiful amount of trauma as women, for instance, in our history, and like the learned adaptive strategies that we've had to our nervous systems have had to adapt in order to keep us safe. There's so much I could say here. So we learn how to build capacity to be with this, and in time we allow it. We learn how to allow so that the body, we can lean into the wisdom of the body and use our attention to track and allow it. So attention plus, we'll use in this instance, we have more channels than just sensation in our human experience, but our attention plus sensation and this allowance can actually allow our primal physiology to move and integrate, and this is neuroplasticity in action. And of course, we can do it on our own or with another. Sometimes we need another for this. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I just love how you speak, and in that, there's a few places I want to go with this, but let's start here because you speak to safety being sexy. Okay. And what I kind of read from that is we can be going out into the world doing big things, like you said, sharing your voice, launching things, just stepping out of our comfort zone. And if we do not experience safety in our body and in our nervous system, then it can express and manifest as a trauma response, right? But I would love you to explain in your words what that means and why safety is so important, especially for women building these bodies of work that have these big missions and visions, and like, why is safety such an important part of that?
So I'll start by saying that I realized when I first was introduced to this work 13 years ago that it makes me emotional just even orienting to this. I had never felt safe in my whole life, and I didn't know it. So it's one thing, for those of you that are listening, it's one thing to like orient to mentally understanding safety. It's like, yeah, I feel safe. Of course I feel safe. But to actually experience relative safety in our system is a whole other dynamic. And that experience is where authenticity lives. That's where dynamic power lives. That's where sovereignty lives. That's where clarity of thought lives. That's where resourcefulness, resiliency lives. Because as soon as we and our nervous systems, don't feel safe, and especially if we don't know they don't feel safe, we're at the mercy of adaptation strategies, and we're going to ultimately be chasing goals and desires that actually aren't ours. So for instance, we're going to be more likely to be in the fawning response, people pleasing, chasing perfection, chasing attention, and orienting to those needs and desires versus actual soul fulfillment. Because I believe that the nervous system is an expression of consciousness, and it's a manifestation of the beauty and the technology of consciousness. And so when we don't have coherence here, how can we actually be coherent and present to what is our soul's calling, our truth? And then beyond that, when we don't feel safe, we're overriding. I'm really oversimplifying things here, so I'm not like totally scientifically correct in everything that I'm saying, so I'll acknowledge that, but just for the sake of conversation and it landing, it's coming out this way. So when safety isn't there, we are overriding, and when we override, that's when we lean into burnout, because we're not able to listen to our bodies, we don't trust our bodies, we don't prioritize our bodies, the cues, and we lead ourselves to places, to empty wells of water that are really unfulfilling, and we have no idea. And so I work with hundreds of clients and very high functioning human beings that a lot of you would know, and on the outside their lives look like incredible, but they're feeling just the longing of the disconnection and the lack of alignment from their soul. And so often in the process, as you start to learn how to inhabit and co-create more safety for ourselves and show our nervous systems that we're safe, the more grief starts to come online, because you start to recognize where you've been and the way you've been leading and loving yourself and others. And so safety is absolutely foundational for everything, for authenticity, expression, sustainability, for health and well-being, for pleasure, for even orgasm, so it's the foundation, and this is why I lean into it as sexy, I think, because I just have so many conversations with women, and I work with couples, and a lot of women especially are really desiring their sexuality and to reclaim and to heal what's been lost in our cultural conditioning and in the trauma of what it's meant to be a woman in our bodies. And we're reclaiming our bodies, but at the same time we're reclaiming our sexuality as power. And the bedroom, sex, intimacy requires safety, and same with our business, our body of work. We have to learn how to hold that for ourselves, especially if it was never mirrored or held for us. So it's not an even playing field, and that's where I think we really need to remember, we can't compare ourselves to other. The body, soma, brings you back to self, what do I need? And we orient from the place of our own power, our own knowing. And it's not an even playing field. Some of us came into really safe wombs and really safe homes and really safe systems, and some of us didn't. And so a lot of us have more work to do when it comes to showing ourselves how we can access relative safety.
Body of Work Foundations by Presence Media is starting soon. It's time to return to your foundations, your roots, your body, your essence, and your truth, and build a body of work that changes the world from the inside out. Body of Work Foundations is a culmination of my nearly 20 years in the online space, supporting hundreds, if not thousands, of successful feminine leaders and descending into a body-based way of being in business. Don't be fooled by the word foundations. This is not a business 101 or basic business program. This program will challenge the most fundamental aspects of you. It'll bring you to your knees, sober you to what is, and require you to face all your worldly fears. It'll ask you to stand in your power and meet resistance and discomfort as your physical reality shifts around you, creating space for your new body of work to emerge. It will require difficult decisions and hard conversations. For this reason, we have brought in a support network of teachers, some of the best somatic practitioners and energetic workers of our time, to guide you back to your foundations, the roots of who you are and why you are here. If you're ready to build your body of work from a rooted place of truth, get on the waitlist for Body of Work Foundations and receive exclusive pricing for when it launches later in June. This program is self-paced and includes 7 core teachings and dozens of supplementary teachings and practices to descend you into your most pristine and potent body of work. All the details are in the show notes.
Can you speak a bit more, your example, and I can relate to this too, like I'm safe, like I have my needs met, I have food and a roof over my head, and I live in a great place, and I have a, healthy marriage or whatever these conditions are, but that lack of intrinsic safety, where does that stem from? Like, can you speak more to, the trauma, I guess, or the imprints, or where does that come from? And how can somebody that may be like, does this apply to me? I don't know. I feel safe. Like, how would they then examine that, oh, maybe there is an underlying lack of safety that I'm actually experiencing?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying a symptom of knowing that that we're experiencing a lack of safety is if we can't create change in our lives. If we keep on getting stuck in same old patterns, whether that pattern is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or relational. And so if there's a stuckness there and there's a repeat of pattern, we know there's a level of a lack of access to safety. And now that safety could either be physical or emotional. Now, when it comes to how we actually experience the lack of safety and where does that come from, it comes from trauma. So trauma is a bit confusing because people usually relate to trauma as an experience or an event. But the way that I've been trained is trauma is happening in the body because of a lack of what did or didn't happen, or happened too fast, too soon, or not enough. And so trauma could be anything from like emotional neglect. It could be an experience that we just didn't get particular needs met. Maybe we didn't get enough milk from our mama's breast, and we were unable to communicate that, and that chronically happened over time. So we had a lack of actually getting our needs fulfilled. So it can be a confounding impact, or it could be like a bigger experience where, there's like, say for myself, it was a birth trauma, and it ended up in the loss of our twin girls. And so there was a big event that really created so much dysregulation in me because it was bigger than what I knew and how I was modeled and trained to be able to hold. It also could be a shock response. So someone has, like say a brain injury, like a snowboarder where, Whistler, people just like fall down and then their body just, they have a really big accident and they're not actually able to complete the response of the nervous system because I feel like I'm going too far. Let me know if I'm taking this too far.
No, okay. Keep going. I like this. Yeah.
So either because, often I'll give lots of reasons, but one really good reason is that we often override. So for instance, I'll give you a personal example from me because this is really prevalent in our communities. When I had a surfing accident, I had a blow to my head at the surf and I had a mild traumatic brain injury. Right after the accident, I got to the shore and my face was, really gory. And I ended up, the guy who was helping me out in the water ended up passing out when we got to the beach. So I overrode my own trauma response in order to support him. And then no one really supported me and what I needed, like the trembling and the releasing of the traumatic energy, because I wasn't then supporting him. So we have this brilliant dynamic to override in need. And because we're so wired for connection and needing another and supporting one another, especially biological females, we're really prone to like leaning into nurture. We can override our own biological processes in order to support another, but then that means that we have stuck traumatic energy in our system. And then you enter the medical field, and then you're just kind of at the mercy of lights and sound, and for a lot of us, like some neglect and not actually being heard and trusted. And so it's a buildup there. We also have intergenerational trauma. So, actually like the experiences are actually forming epigenetics cellularly in our DNA, right? Our environmental conditioning is basically what is expressing in our DNA and in our cells. We also have trauma because trauma is also a lack of what's not nourished in the body, right? So a lot of us are undernourished a lot of toxicity in our system and our environment. And so trauma, I have a more expansive, holistic lens, I think, when it comes to it, but there's many reasons why there's dysregulation or why one might not feel safe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about, like, let's take hypervigilance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big one, especially for high-performing people. It can be, right?
Yeah.
What's happening in the nervous system? What's happening somatically with hypervigilance, as an example?
So hypervigilance, it would be dependent on the person, but an example would be, think about, we want to think about our survival strategies as allies. And so how brilliant is it that we can be hypervigilant in a world that ultimately has safety and also danger, right? So when we lean into the primal, this is why I love primal, like we're mammals out in the kingdom, out in the queendom, right? And so it's so necessary, like how brilliant that we have access to hypervigilance. Now, for those of us that have a history where hypervigilance has been necessary in order to stay emotionally and physically safe, we're more likely to lean into hypervigilance as our baseline and not know that there's another way, right? So the hypervigilance could be an expression of both an activated nervous system or also more of like the freeze state, tonic immobility, where there's like the gas is on and the brakes are on at the same time. How does that land for you?
What I find interesting is just all of the different expressions, right?
Mm-hmm.
that we see and that that I've experienced too, and that I'm kind of unwinding in myself. And we speak about a lot in the industry that we're in, like the 10x, right? And like, what does it mean to like embody the 10x level of your business from an energetic state? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think without the safety, right, that we can often trend towards these states of like control or hypervigilance or whatever it is to try to achieve a certain state. And so the somatics of 10x, what needs to happen in our bodies, in our nervous systems, so we can actually hold an expanded version of reality without kind of, being activated by these trauma responses. What has to happen?
Well, I'll give you the ideal of what I would love to say it could be another way, but I think that's me being more hopeful than realistic. I think it's so important we devote ourselves to our own healing. Like, that is probably the best investment I think we could ever make.
So 10x is full devotion to healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
I do. I think that, and that healing both comes from and with another, because we have an absolute biological imperative to lean on another nervous system. Because if you think about when we come out of the womb, we don't know how to self-regulate. We are so needy. Co-regulation is how we survive. Now, the way that we learn self-regulation is through who and that which we co-regulate with. So if we don't get co-regulation, we're not taught how to self-regulate. So we live in a world where a lot of people actually don't know how to parent and guide themselves, because we physiologically, it's so valid. We haven't had that mirroring. We haven't had that experience. And that was my experience as well. And so we need another. And a lot of the time we can offer ourselves our own healing. And this is why I've invested in pouring so much into the Somatic Way, is so that we can actually learn how to, I don't love the word govern, but I see it resonates with a lot of people, like govern ourselves, lead ourselves back into wholeness and safety moment to moment. And when we can do this, at least we can anchor into the vision of where we want to go and what we want to create, and where the why is generated from. Does that make sense? So for instance, prior to me really devoting myself to somatic healing, I've done hundreds of sessions and I'm a very different human being. And the reason why I'm very different is because my why is coming from a very different place. My life may look similar on the outside, but the why and how, and then therefore how I show up, is just so much more in alignment, and it doesn't carry survival energy nearly as much. Of course, like I said, we're humans, so we dip in and out. So I'd say your own personal healing, learning how to offer ourselves and show our nervous systems that they're safe, learning how to repair those. I don't love using the word core wounds because we have many wounds if we're human, and the way that we find those wounds is through our somatics, not through the mind. We lean into the body, and eventually once we learn how to track our own soma, the soma will tell the story of what's present. And because our trauma comes from beyond this timeline as well, and our conscious memory, our explicit memory is not that reliable, our implicit, which is not actually consciously remembered, is so reliable because it's actually creating what we're experiencing and how we relate to ourselves and the world, and therefore what we can actually hold. Can we hold a 10x vision? Can we stay well and alive and nourished within this 10x vision, rather than being so moving from so much for survival and being maybe in a survival pattern of fawning and people pleasing, and therefore totally abandoning ourselves and our bodies and maybe even our family and our loved ones in the vision, right? And I really love this about you and your work, Megan, because I feel the holism of what you're really creating with body of work and how you've supported me with the upgrade, because it's all of it. And I think that that's the majority of the people that are going to be here with you, are the people that really care about staying anchored in what matters most, on top of it being a 10x vision, and knowing and learning that that 10x vision doesn't define their sense of belonging. It's just a vision that they can show up for wholeheartedly, and we can build the capacity to know that we can also fail, and that's okay. We can make mistakes, and that's okay. And that's what safety does. It allows us to make mistakes. It allows us to know that we can renegotiate any decision we've ever made. It allows us to repair, to see more clearly, to trust ourselves. So that's where I say healing and learning how to hold and lead ourselves is like so important in the healing, instead of just the coping, which is what I see the majority of like the self-development and kind of somatic world doing. It's actually time to like really heal.
Yeah. And I see that too. Like I see the 10x being something we need to expand into or achieve, and like that energy of it. And then I love how you put it as a healing journey, because to me 10x is not more, it's deeper, right? It's being able to more fully actually receive first what is here before we move into another flow. And when we were talking before this, you were speaking about your own co-creative process and your how you move through the world and respond to what is, and I'd love to hear maybe a bit about your story. You say your why has shifted over the years as you've been doing this somatic work, as you've been deepening to this way. And so how has your why shifted, and how have you shifted how you respond to the world now that you are, steeped in the somatic way?
Oh my gosh, so much. So, prior to being introduced to somatic healing and really like having a real world understanding of how my nervous system was impacting me, I was a wellness practitioner, a doula since I was 17, a kinesiologist and a yoga therapist, and gosh, I was like the epitome of what embodiment, what most people thought embodiment was. And it wasn't until life got really hard that I realized, like, wow, I'm actually so disembodied. I know the body really well, and I know what's right for it. But whoa, man, I do not know how to listen to her. I don't know how to respect her. I could just feel it was like an inner knowing. I was banging my drum in my studio one morning, and I just had all this grief, and it really was around the feminine, like the wounding of the feminine. I could feel that in the embodiment of my current experience. And so if I hadn't have found somatic healing and developed a relationship with my survival physiology, I would be so sick. I don't know, with my, my CF, I don't think I really don't think I would be here. I'm always hesitant because of the drama, but that's my truth. I don't think I would still be alive with my disease. I would have pushed. I would not been able to discern my edges to know what's best for me. There's no way I would be in a loving partnership. No way. No, I would be in the power struggle till my deathbed for sure in my relationship, despite my desire for connection and for deep love. I would not known how to hold that. So I would have carried my work with a lot of grief, a lot of projection, a lot of shadow, a lot of imposter syndrome. I would have been highly impacted if I wasn't successful, or if I didn't get people into my offerings, or if I'd gotten the wrong look, if I had hypervigilance around people's looks. Now I just know that I have so much spaciousness to be fully human now. And just to fuck up. It's okay. So I feel like I can just move and I can pivot, and I'm not tied to anything. I'm not moving from a place of survival. I'm not trying to fit in. I mean, of course I am to some extent, because I'm human and I'm a woman, and we can't really escape that biologically to some extent. But yeah, I'd be sick, tired, loveless, probably depressed, but not tell anyone. And I would not be a powerful leader at all. I would not be able to hold the space that I do now at all. So it would have been generated from, a very fragmented version of who Zoe was. And the interesting thing is that a lot of my friends from back then are like, oh, we loved the Zoe then. I'm like, no. So on the outside, it's we can't always reflect what the right thing is for us on the outside. We have to just trust our own experience of what goodness is for us. Yeah.
What's your why now?
My why around relative to why I do the work that I do, or were you speaking more around what we were talking about earlier with the soul, more the soul piece?
What do I mean? I just mean, what do you orient? What are you orienting towards? What is the most important North Star for your focus, your life force right now?
I love this question. I'd say it's threefold. The really beautiful thing about working with the humanness of ourselves, the bodies, and learning how to find and access safety is, for me, my spirituality was a bypassing of my humanness before, but now I feel so rooted and embodied in the tangibleness of my spirituality. And so I feel such a direct line, a direct connection between me and the mystery and this dance, which takes a lot of pressure off and also makes everything so much more invitational and beautiful and meaningful for me. And so my why is really just listening. Like I was saying, I really, really listen to the cues of my unconditional relationship with, I can't even just say spirit, because it feels bigger than that, with the mystery. And I just feel like it's a calling, and it's an undeniable knowing in my bones. I operate very much somatically, and I've been through so much myself. So my narrative medicine, my storyline alone is I've been through the fires, many fires, and I've walked through them, rather than around them. And that's been my soul's path and my journey. And I have a lot of people that are knocking on my door and wanting my support. And so how can I not show up for that? And I'm showing up as a human. Yeah, I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner and I have all these accreditations, but people knock on my door because I'm a human. And so I'm just following, I'm just listening. And that's my why. And then I love it and I just feel so fulfilled. Yeah. And it doesn't tax me, which is a big thing. I don't all get taxed by my work. Yeah.
That's how you know, I think, that you're doing it from the right place, hey?
Yeah.
When it feeds you instead of depletes you.
Yeah. And then on a more like tangible level, to some degree, for some people, like I've said, it's really a peaceful rebellion to reclaim our humanization. And I do feel like you named it before, trauma is so decontextualized. Nervous system dysregulation and a lack of safety is not only usually experienced unconsciously as our baseline, but also it's decontextualized and it's manifesting in all these ways. And so it's just such a powerful universal solution to come back to for everybody, rather than a supplement here or a good night's sleep here. It's not conditional. It's like this is something we can all anchor into and offer ourselves and one another. So it's so accessible. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is why with Body of Work Foundations, I was so excited that you were a part of it, because this is so foundational to women, anyone, to fully bring their body of work to life in the highest integrity way. And so I want to hear about the Somatic Way in a moment, which is your foundational program, and why people would benefit from taking that. But first, can you just speak to the woman listening who is developing her body of work right now and wants to do it from an embodied place, and maybe she's also recognizing, like, I understand it conceptually, but I'm not fully living it in my body. Or maybe she's noticing, like you said, those patterns she's replaying and like looping in the same stuff. And what can you recommend that woman? I know you talk about like tracking the soma and the story of the soma. I'd love to hear about that and how you use like primal movement. But what would your advice be to that woman who's like really ready to drop into her body and bring to life her body of work in the highest way in these times?
I would say anchoring into support, for sure, like regulation, someone that can co-regulate with you, that can hold that vision with you, and that just feels and knows your wholeness and your brilliance, so that can get mirrored and reflected back to you. Because so much of us women have adapted, learned helplessness as a strategy for survival. And so when we can have another, I want to say woman right now for some reason, I'm sure it can be anyone, that can mirror our power and our sovereignty and our wholeness back to us despite the vortex of maybe defeat or self-doubt that we might be in, that is so important. I'm not touching into the somatics as much right now, but this is to support the body for the body of work. And then from anchoring and providing like a network of support, I would say learning how to show your nervous system that you're safe, and learning and having, I guess, a bit of discipline, around noticing and dropping into the pauses, especially when you don't want to pause. And so in somatic experiencing, we say like slow is the new black, and titration, which is tiny little bits at a time, is more powerful than jumping into the deep end. So the more that we can honor a slowness and a deepness, like you said, and move from that place of trusting, that's typically best for sustaining our body of work in alignment with who we are, so that we can show up fully in our body of work from a safe and more regulated space. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to why that primal nature is part of the safety, is part of the regulation? I just love, you have a practice inside Body of Work where you ask us to embody like a jaguar or a cat, and like how does that help bring us into safety and regulation?
Right. Okay. So when we bring more conscious awareness to the way that we move and we relate to our body, we're instantly bringing our attention to the possibility. And as soon as we have possibility to bring our attention somewhere else, we are showing our nervous system that there's no threat right now. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if we think about it, for a lot of us, this is a very common example, and I'll just keep using it for now. A lot of us feel like there is ultimately like a tiger chasing us, or death is imminent if we go up and speak on stage. Like ultimately that is what the nervous system feels, because it can't decipher between emotional threat and physical threat. So majority of our body of work is really navigating emotional threat. And from there, it's like being seen, feeling safe to be seen, feeling safe to have an opinion. And so when we can bring our attention to something outside of that vortex, we're like, oh, we're showing our nervous systems like there's no tiger chasing us. Like I'm just a woman in this flesh with these bones, and I can actually use my eyes to explore and get curious about this room, versus being hypervigilant and hyper-focused on a computer, which is just reiterating that there's a tiger chasing us. So the more that we can drop in and get curious and just start to embody what it would feel like, to be more of a primal being, we start to notice like what we call like the fluidity, the fluid nature of our body per se. Not everyone, but for me, that's my experience right now. And then you start to notice, oh, my body, it doesn't have to be so tense and so here and so present. Like I can still be really present and like doing my thing. In fact, the more that I just like let myself experience this, for you, your womb tingle or whatever, I'm actually more present, and I'm actually like, whoa, my nervous system is feeling good. I feel safe. So that's a couple of aspects. The other one is just from an architecture point of view of our physical body. When we are under threat, what do we think usually happens to our body? We get tense, or if it's a chronic threat, we go like into full collapse, right? So self-preservation, energy preservation, right? So that we can't feel, for instance. So we have a spectrum, which we haven't gone into it, maybe another episode of how we experience ourselves. But when we can start to bring movement into the architecture of our body, we're actually showing our system it doesn't have to be tense, right? So we start to lean into, and the more we orient to what I feel primal, it just brings in this beautiful element of permission around being the mammals that we are. And it's not about like totally domesticating ourselves, but actually accessing like how beautiful that is and how powerful that is to feel our wild nature in our soma and in our body. And so just by doing that, we're showing our nervous systems that we're safe, because we're orienting, we're moving, and you'll start to feel, as we do that, you start to feel more and more presence. Your eyes start seeing more clearly, but not as intensely. Your body just starts to feel the zing of like wholeness and lightness and ease and spaciousness and groundedness. So, yeah.
I love these practices, and it feels like a whole other way than mindset and trying to like think our way and force our way or journal our way, or, there's a lot of different ways that we can shift states. But I feel the somatic way, and I'm going to open this space for you to speak about your program, the Somatic Way, because I'm so excited that this is coming to the world, and
me too.
I'm excited to take it and all of the things. But how does the Somatic Way differ from these other ways, and tell me what you're most excited about with the Somatic Way program that you are birthing right now. Like, what excites you most about this program? This is a big piece of your body of work, and like you said, decades of this come together. So what are you proud to share about this modality that you have created?
Well, my somatic training started 14 years ago, and the bulk of the somatic training that I did was somatic experiencing, which is just over 3 years. Now, that training I wish that every human could do, because it's an immersive 3-year experience. But that's not possible, and that training is specifically for people that want to be practitioners. Yet the bulk, I keep on saying bulk, the bulk of that training is actually integration and learning how to come back to ourselves through our soma and offer ourselves the space and the healing that's needed, and also receive the support that is needed. So I wish that every human could have that opportunity, but we don't. And what I've realized, it's taken me 14 years to build the confidence and the knowing that, wow, we can offer so much of that for ourselves. And I wish so deeply that I had what I'm sharing now in the Somatic Way. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Back when life was really hard, and hard because life was hard, but also because I'm a visionary and I had big dreams and I had a huge soul calling, like everyone does, everyone that's listening. And it was so undeniable, but my humanness was getting in the way so much. So that gap between what I longed for and I knew was possible to create and what I was here for on the planet was actually impossible to create in a healthy, sustainable way. And so it's taken me 14 years to be in the mess and the beauty and the initiations and the invitations of my own healing to learn, okay, we can actually hold so much of what I've learned over the past 14 years in a method, in a very dynamic, circular living method for ourselves, so that we can show ourselves, govern ourselves, lead ourselves, and love ourselves through the lens of our primal survival physiology. And so I'm distilling it into a really sustainable, powerful opportunity to, like I said, choose the healing in every moment. And that's my desire, is for people to first discern when they're coping versus healing. And the Somatic Way is really about healing, because we talk so much about lacking integration. I'm like, the Somatic Way is a way of life. It's showing up, because healing happens in the moments when humility is needed, when truth is needed. And so the Somatic Way resources us to show up with a dynamic method, that's quite clear within the nuances of what it means to be human, and can offer us the healing that we need in the moments when we need it most. So I'm so excited to and really proud to be sharing, the Somatic Way. And how does it differ? I mean, I'm a whole different human. I'm so unique. We're all so unique. And so I have my story, my gifts, my shadows. I have all of me that is wrapped up into the Somatic Way through my lens and my experience and what I think is relevant and important. And where I think that this, where the Somatic Way really differs is it's a coming back to you. It's not a method in terms of you following anything other than learning how to resource yourself. It's not here to give you answers. It's here to empower you to know your own answers, to know your own way. And then, of course, that's track 1. There's personal evolution, learning how to become your own greatest resource, your own greatest medicine. And then track 2 is for those that are called to step into full embodied leadership with somatic integrity, so that they can not only offer the somatic way, but show up in all of who they are, because so many of us are craving that authenticity which lives from and needs the mechanics of nervous system regulation to be there in. And the people that you and I think are attracted to our work are visionaries. They desire impact. They know they're here. Their soul's calling is to have and make an impact in whatever way that is. And I think that also more and more people, I would love for more and more people to identify as leaders. We're all leaders, whether or not we're online, whether or not we are entrepreneurs. My neighbors often lead me. My new neighbor here is this beautiful woman, and she's like such a leader, but she would never identify as a leader. And so there's a lot of empowered self-responsibility without it weighing us down that comes in the second track. Yeah.
I cannot wait for this.
Oh, me too.
How do we get on the wait list? How do we put our name down? How do we find out more about it? And I'll make sure to link it in the show notes.
Yeah, well, I'm working with Presence Media right now.
Let's plug.
Yes. And because of my health challenges, I haven't got that up yet. I do actually. That said, I have a current wait list. If you head to if you head to my Instagram, there's a wait list on my Instagram. So at Zoe_Stimpson, and I also have started the_Somatic Way. Maybe you could link that in, because I don't think I shared that very clearly. And so there's wait lists there, but soon I will be having the launch of my new website, where there'll be a lot more accessible, clearer ways to get on there. So I think in the meantime, stay tuned on Instagram, and feel free to message me in my DMs, and I'll definitely put you on a specific little list with Megan.
Yeah, and we are huge advocates of Zoe and her work at Presence Media, so we will also be sharing on all of our channels when it is live, but I'll definitely link to in the show notes how people can get on that wait list and how they can follow you and all that you're up to. And I'll just leave with one more question. What's turning you on right now, babe? What's turning you on now most about your life and business, wherever you want to take it?
Yeah, I'm I've expressed to you, so Mike and I are in a real deepening of our relationship right now. That came through a pretty big rupture, and it's opened up so much of my desire for more intimacy and contact in our lovemaking, and in my experience of being a woman in this relationship. And so I'm really in this embodied redefinition of stepping more and more into the woman that I am now versus the woman that I was. And that's feeling so sex is just, I'm 42. Things were kind of going downhill in terms of, I was like, what is happening? And so I'm feeling this real rev happening inside of me, and it's not just coming from my vagina, it's coming from this real desire of just feeling so good as a woman, and really calling, requesting and somewhat demanding actually what I need and what I want relationally. And Mike is responding so beautifully. And so I'm finding the more and more I learn just about the bigness of boundaries, really coming from a place of need and want, and how much that supports the ones that we love to step into what they want to rise to. And so this is what's turning me on most right now, is just recognizing often what we're scared most of. My client before this is of her power, yet when we stand in our power, that's when we actually find the most safety. But it is often scary to get there, and that's where the Somatic Way and learning how to access safety will help us step into our power to learn how to hold that. Yeah.
So glad I asked that question. I feel like we need a whole separate podcast episode just on that topic. Yes. And I know you do 2-to-1.
I do, yeah.
support too for couples.
I do.
So,
Deeper love.
Deeper love. Yeah. Which is, it's been a huge focus on my marriage with Dennis and our relationship. So maybe we will do another podcast on deeper love, because I feel like it's you know, the body of work is all of it, right? Like the relationships and thriving in all areas, especially the relationships that are in front of our face on a day-to-day basis. Like this really is what truly matters. You know, these missions and these visions and all of this is fucking beautiful. But if the relationship and the love that is in front of our face every day isn't thriving and feeling nourishing, like that's where our body of work gets to focus.
Totally. I mean, the interpersonal biology and the way that impacts us is so huge. And, oh my gosh, we could, just on the note of just, feminine and masculine consciousness, there's just a whole belief that I've been forming this past 10 years around just the necessity of it and how fractured our family systems and our dynamics around relationships and beliefs around relationships are. And I feel like there's so much repair needed, and that family system is the core of the healing that I think the planet needs. I used to think it was mothering and being a doula, and now I'm like, it's that, and it's really the family system. It's our relational dynamics that play a huge part in what's possible, because our environment predicts what we experience in our inner worlds. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there, but that is like a whole other topic.
It is.
Follow Zoe on Instagram for more of these conversations, because you do share so beautifully about your beautiful life that you've consciously, curated and cultivated with your family, and I love how you like bring that realness and that authenticity through your channel. So for more of that and deeper love and Somatic Way and all the goodness, everything's linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, and finally we've come together. We were trying to get this in the calendar for a while, and I think the timing this is the timing it was meant to be. So thank you so much for showing up.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, love. I'm so down for these conversations. I just love and respect so much of your work and what you do. So I'm happy to be held and a part of it anytime.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode, and thanks so much to another amazing guest. If you love this episode, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. We are committed to producing weekly episodes to turn you on and tune up the volume of your voice and impact in the world. I would love to stay connected. You can come and follow me over on Instagram at The Grounded Visionary, or if you're interested in learning more about the services we provide at Presence Media, check us out at www.presencemedia.co. See you next week.